Hello, dear watchers. Today I will tell you about the pre-civilizational part of the Stone Age. Almost everything I know and learning while researching will be included in this video. First of all, I want to start by correcting something that many misunderstood. Dinosaurs and early humans did not live at the same time, and there are more than 65 million years between them. However, if we talk about Africa, Anankus elephant, Primelapes elephant, mammoth, black mamba, Macaridus, hyenodon species dominated the land, and Sahara deserts was that time a jungle. And Australopithecus, one of our oldest ancestors, they lived in Africa 4 million years ago before Christ. Ancestor of all humans we know, chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas. If you're going to say evolution isn't real, please stop resisting the increase in entropy. Australopithecus jumped from tree to tree and feed on fruit, but occasionally, due to famine, they would descend to the ground and feed on carrion. Although the digestive system is not suitable for this, actually, it's still not appropriate today, but that's the subject of another video. Lucy is the oldest known Australopithecus species. This name was given in 1975 by the team of French Maurice Taïeb and American paleontologist Donald Johnson, who found this fossil in Ethiopia, Africa, and gave the skeleton a name during dinner. Lucy. This name has a deep and ongoing story, but this is the subject of another video. And there is a beautiful movie called Lucy, which is a science fiction story about what will happen if a person uses his whole brain. It was great to watch with my best friend, and oddly enough, Donald Johnson's student on his team looks like my best friend. Returning to the subject, this fossil belonged to the first human, and then Homo habilis evolved 2.3 million to 1.4 million before Christ. Homo means human in Latin. Homo habilis also means talented and handworking in Latin. They get this name from the first tools they used, namely sharpened stones. I hate the most epic weapon in the world, but for the Stone Age. By the way, you don't have to go far to see habilis. Just go to a Keko district. Keko is a person who behaves strangely, usually composed of aggressive and egoistic people in Turkey. It means brother in Kurdish. Homo naledi, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo gaultengensis are transitional species between Australopithecus and Homo habilis. If I had to define a transitional type, living things evolve slowly from mutations that accumulate slowly. and so it is difficult to decide where a species evolves into a new species in transitions from species to species. Homo ergaster is thought to be the first to communicate by making complex sounds. They lived 1.8 to 1.3 million years ago before Christ. They found fire, made the first eggs. Thanks to the cooked meat, they did not need a muscular jaw, and 3-4 jaw muscles gradually weakened and thinned, and their brain volume and intelligence increased. Moreover, it was able to use energy for more brain functions while spending less energy on digestion. Homo antecessor was the first humans to store such prey, from time to time with cannibalism. Before continuing from Homo erectus, I will tell about mirror neurons because this is very important to me. The moment when everything started, before Christ, 100,000 years ago, mirror neurons in the prefrontal cortex of the human brain developed and grew. And science and since then the world has encountered something it has never encountered before: intelligence. Every innovation and art I will talk about from here on out: philosophy, science, psychology, language, literature, religions, and beliefs emerged thanks to this development. This region has given people the ability to imitate and empathize. From here on, we are now witnessing to the first time people leave Africa. So I have to explain a little bit about Eurasia. Mammoths, Hindon, and Makaidos also ruled here and had a colder climate than Africa, because the last ice age was going on and most of Eurasia and even partly Anatolia was in the ice age. Homo erectus, 2 million to 100,000 years ago before Christ. They carved seams like tear-sharpened stones. They traded seashells and obsidian. It linked to the pot with clay. It has spread all over Afro-Eurasia. Erectus means upright in Latin. For this name is that it is the most upright human species. Homo heidelbergensis, 600,000 to 250,000 before Christ, the first species to emerge from Africa. The first people to find clothing were also the first to bury the dead. In other words, humanity was now creating its own culture, and there is evidence of occasionally domestic violence. Bow and arrow were invented in 60,000 years ago before Christ from Africa, and weak people too can survive. This allowed the number of people to increase even more. Denisova people before Christ, 400 20,000 to 30,000 lived in the Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains, and they were quite resistant to the cold. However, they have been found to hybrid with both Neanderthals and Erectus, and many of us carried the Denisova again. Homo neanderthal before Christ 600,000 to 30,000. They invented glue, veggie casserole, flute, and paint. They painted their faces and cave walls. They used red mustard as an antiseptic. They treated broken feet and arms with splints. They used chamomile against inflammation, and the first shamans still use religious treatments today, since those Neanderthals could treat them with a placebo. Even if there was no psychological effect. The remains of a group of Neanderthals have been found in a cave in Belgium, which dismembered their dead mates and used their bones to sharpen their tools. However, scientists are thinking they are cannibal, but there is not enough evidence yet. They played flutes that they made from the leg bones of bears. The oldest instrument after bone flutes is a specially perforated seashell. They made it 17,000 years ago. 1,000 years after the Neanderthals went extinct. Today, every human except Africans has 2 to 6% Neanderthal genes, so it's not completely extinct. This is due to interspecies mating. However, don't be fooled by the definition of species taught in high schools. If animals can mate, defining them as a species is a very superficial and dysfunctional definition. We are biologically different from them. The Neanderthal A chromosome was defensive against the human X chromosome cells, so miscarriages occurred, but children could be born with a human male and a Neanderthal female. And 20% of Neanderthal genes are still present in the human gene pool today. That's why racism is bullshit, because we don't all hybrid it anyway. Homo bodiensis is actually a species born through a classification controversy. It is planned to name Heidelbergensis, Rhodensis, and Erectus, all as Homo bodiensis. As for Homo rhodensis, it is a transitional species between Homo heidelberg and Erectus, the same with Homo cambrensis. Homo fullerensis 100,000 to 12,000 before Christ. Indonesian Flores Island species were first discovered when they were thought to have a disease that prevented them from growing, because their height was 1 meter and 10 centimeters, and on average they even got the nickname of hobbits percentage. However, the reason for their short stature is a conditional called island dwarfism. The station in which island-dwelling species evolved to expend less energy due to the limited resources on the island. There was even dwarfism in pygmy elephants living on the same island. Their height was 1.5 to 2.3 meters, but that humans were intelligent enough to use fire. Homolongi is a species that lived around 146,000 before Christ, but whether it is a species is debatable. A local contract worker found an almost complete skull on the banks of the Shongwa River in 1933 while building the Dongjiang Bridge in Heilongjiang Harbin, then Manchukuo, for Japan's Manchukuo National Railway. Recognizing its importance possibly as a result of the public interest in anthropology recently created by Peking Man in 1929, he decided to hide it from the Manchukuo authorities in an abandoned well. After Manchukuo Soviet defeat, the former Manchukuo National Railroad hid its employment from the nationalist and later communist officials. Just before his death, the third generation of his family learned of the skull and got it back in 2018. Chinese paleontologist Chiang Ji convinced the family to donate it to Hebei Geo. Chiang Ji convinced the family to donate it to Hebei Geo University, where it is currently stored for research. We don't have much information about the place where the skull was removed, as research has not been done. Since there is not enough information, it is suggested by some people to define it as Homo denisova. Homo sapien, that is us modern humans. They were spreading all over the world like Erectusa that appeared 17,000 years ago. Sapien means intelligent in Latin. Most such fossils were found in Rift Valley, Africa, and there are more fossils where they came from. However, the Rift Valley is gradually separating and Africa is splitting into, giving birth to a new continent. We'd better get the fossils out before the sea waters get in the way. But there's no need to worry about this because there's a lot of more to it than that. 75,000 years ago, the Sumatra volcano erupted, creating the trough of present-day Lake Toba, and the ash that was scattered into the air with it poisoned the surrounding rivers and blocked sunlight from the atmosphere, creating a small ice age. This great explosion caused the death of many creatures of time. If you're just wondering how a volcanic eruption changed the world like this, subscribe to my channel and space free to the topics you want in the comments. Along with some human species, all humans alive today are descended from 10,000 to 50,000 people living in Africa. The Erectus in Africa used iron ore for treatment, but the Erectus in Australia very important people in iron powder while burying them. The Mungo man who died 7,000 years ago in Australia is a good example, and they used the red color they made from iron powder to paint caves. Australian natives, aka Aborigines, today they come here during the Ice Age, 50,000 years ago. But when the Ice Age ended and the seas rise, they were stuck there. They were divided into small groups and traveled between 13 points and gathered on 13 days and performed rituals. These gathering prevented genetic disease caused by relations between relatives and prevented them from breaking away from each other. Today, they continue their rituals and continue to live in Australia without harming nature. They don't even build houses in order not to harm nature. But the most interesting part is the songs they sing in the ritual. These songs record everything they observe in the environment: extinct species, sinking islands, falling meteorites. These songs are called Dreamtime stories and serve as historical records, religious and moral codes. A group of people settled on the Sentinel Island near India. We don't know much about them because they are very aggressive, but they've been there since the Stone Age and are live like aborigines. In our last contact, they attacked us with stone arrows and throwing stones. Meanwhile, Erectus in Europa were doing gene transfer and living together with Neanderthals. But the Neanderthals became extinct towards the end of the Ice Age. The reason is unknown, maybe not being able to adapt to the changing climate, maybe a war or genocide between the Erectus people. However, I read in a different source that they couldn't use spears well enough because their arms were short, so they may have become extinct. Before Christ, 40,000 years ago, some people invented the first shoes by tying the skins of the animals they hunted their feet and stuffing them with straw to make them soft. For clothing, they shaved the skin to soften it. They could make it more durable by holding it to smoke afterwards. They invented the dress up and the shoe because they had to. Due to the tilt of the Earth's axis, the last ice age began. Earth's axial tilt ranges from 22 degrees to 24 0.5 degrees over a 41.51 thousand year cycle. It is currently about 23 degrees and decreasing gradually, and rain clouds were gathering in more equatorial regions as large ice floes invaded the northern hemisphere. And instead of the Sahara Desert, there was the Sahara Rainforest. 14,800 years ago, Native Americans crossed the ice bridge of the Bering Strait, Sea, gorge, and arrived in the Americas via rafts and moss-covered coastlines. Of course, it would later be discovered by the Vikings. Here I would like to talk about the cave painting. That I liked most the cave paintings with their hands in the Cuevas de las Manos cave that interested me the most. Cuevas de las Manos cave that interests me the most, because instead of carving their individual symbols on the walls against the fear of being forgotten, I see a society coming together and making an effort not to be forgotten. Of course, this is my opinion. But 20,000 years ago, the last ice age ended and melting ice raised sea level by 120 to 130 meters, and the tracks were submerged. Nevertheless, immigration to America continued on foot through Alaska for a while. As the glaciers melted, the rains made their way to more northern regions. The Sahara gradually became a desert, and due to climate change, our African ancestor Homo erectus began to spread around the world, and other species gradually disappeared. 20,000 years ago, we domesticated the first wolves. 10,000 to 5,000 years ago before Christ, our lactose digesting glands developed. 8,500 years ago, erectus are just getting white-skinned. We made the first fishing nets out of 8,300 barks and fibers. We used honey to heal wounds. 5,500 before Christ. 3,000 years ago before Christ, Eskimos and Aleuts discovered Greenland. 1,000 years ago, the Polynesians ruled every corner of the Pacific Sea with ships they built with stone tools, and so we spread to every continent except Antarctica. And in our most primitive times, I know I have never talked on the subject of civilization, but the next history video will be about the first civilizations. This research took 2 weeks and I did everything myself, including the music and the background video. I would appreciate it if you subscribe and like it. See you later. Good luck in life.